Have you ever felt like there's an invisible thread pulling you towards certain moments, certain people, certain discoveries that seem to arrive exactly when you need them most? That inexplicable magnetism that defies logic, that transcends the mundane explanations of algorithms and chance encounters. If you're watching this right now, I can tell you with absolute certainty, this is one of those moments. You didn't stumble upon this video by accident. Something deeper, something operating on frequencies that most people never learn to tune into has guided you here. Your intuition recognized a signal, a vibrational call that your conscious mind might not even fully understand yet, but your soul absolutely does. Here's what fascinates me about human experience. We live in a world where some people seem to effortlessly attract everything they desire: abundant opportunities, fulfilling relationships, financial prosperity, perfect synchronicities, while others work tirelessly, follow all the advice, do everything right, and still watch their dreams slip through their fingers like water. Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever looked around and wondered why manifestation appears so natural for some while feeling impossibly distant for you? The answer might surprise you, because it has nothing to do with worthiness, luck, or even how hard you're trying. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos, because what we're exploring together could radically shift your entire understanding of how reality actually works. The truth is, there's a secret operating principle that separates those who struggle from those who flow. It's not about positive thinking, though that plays a role. It's not about vision boards, though they can be useful. It's something far more fundamental, something that exists at the energetic foundation of creation itself. Most people go their entire lives without discovering this principle, repeating the same patterns of effort without results, wondering why the universe seems to favor everyone except them. But you're different. The very fact that you're here, that something drew you to this moment, tells me you're ready for a different level of understanding. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might completely transform how you approach manifestation, abundance, and the creation of your desired reality. This isn't about adding more techniques to your arsenal or learning another complicated system. This is about recognizing a force that's been operating through you your entire life, a force you've simply never learned to consciously direct. When you understand how to align with this invisible current, when you learn the language that the universe actually responds to, everything changes. The struggle dissolves, the resistance fades, and what once seemed impossible begins to materialize with a speed that might actually surprise you. So the question isn't whether you have this power. You absolutely do. The question is, are you ready to consciously activate it? Because once you understand what's really happening beneath the surface of your everyday experience, there's no going back to the old way of seeing things. Think about the last time something arrived in your life at exactly the right moment. Maybe it was a conversation with a stranger that contained precisely the insight you needed. Maybe it was a book that fell into your hands just when you were wrestling with a specific question. Maybe it was this very video appearing on your screen today. Most people dismiss these moments as coincidence, as random chance in a chaotic universe. But what if I told you that these moments are actually the most predictable, most reliable aspect of how reality operates? What if these synchronicities aren't accidents at all, but rather the visible evidence of an invisible conversation that's been happening all along? Your soul has been communicating with the universe since the moment you took your first breath. It speaks in a language that transcends words, a dialect of pure vibration, and energetic resonance. Every desire you've ever felt, every longing that stirred in your heart, every vision that's captured your imagination. These aren't random thoughts floating meaninglessly through your consciousness. They're signals, precise broadcasts transmitted into the fabric of existence itself. And the universe, operating with mathematical precision, has been responding to every single one. The problem is that most people never learn to recognize the responses when they arrive. They're waiting for burning bushes and thunderbolts when the universe is speaking through whispers and gentle nudges, through perfectly timed encounters and seemingly small moments that carry enormous significance. The ancient masters understood something that modern society has largely forgotten. They recognized that reality isn't the solid, unchangeable thing we've been taught to believe it is. Behind the scenes of what appears fixed and immovable, there's a fluid intelligence constantly rearranging itself based on the vibrational information it receives. This isn't mystical thinking divorced from science. Quantum physics has been confirming this truth for decades. At the fundamental level of existence, everything is energy in motion, waves of possibility collapsing into specific experiences based on observation and intention. The question that determines your entire life experience is simple but profound. What vibration are you broadcasting? If this resonates with you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the revelations that are coming. This community is built for people who are ready to see beyond the surface, and I'd love to have you as part of it. Here's where the real transformation begins. There exists what I call vibrational coherence, a state where your thoughts, emotions, and intentions align so perfectly that they create a unified signal of extraordinary power. Imagine an orchestra where every instrument is playing a different song. That's how most people's internal world operates. Their conscious mind wants one thing while their subconscious beliefs whisper something completely different. Their intentions point in one direction while their emotional patterns pull in another. And the universe, receiving this mixed signal, this contradictory broadcast, responds with mixed results. But when you achieve coherence, when every level of your being resonates with the same frequency, something remarkable happens. Doors that were previously invisible suddenly become apparent. Opportunities that existed just beyond your perception field suddenly materialize. Into your awareness, resources, people, circumstances all begin organizing themselves around your clarified intention with a precision that can honestly feel startling. The impact of this understanding on your personal journey cannot be overstated. You're not learning to manipulate reality from the outside. You're learning to align with the creative force that's been operating through you all along. You're discovering how to speak the language that reality actually understands, the vibrational dialect that precedes all physical manifestation. And once you grasp this, once you feel it operating in your own experience, the old paradigm of struggle and force becomes obsolete. You stop pushing against closed doors and start recognizing which doors are already opening. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic because understanding coherence intellectually is one thing, but experiencing it as your living reality is something else entirely. There are specific elements that either amplify or interfere with your vibrational signal, hidden factors operating beneath your conscious awareness that have been sabotaging your manifestations without you even realizing it. If you're starting to recognize this pattern in your own life, if something about this resonates with your actual experience, write in the comments, "I recognize the signal." The truth that might unsettle some people is that there are individuals operating at a completely different frequency than the majority. You've probably encountered them without even realizing what you were witnessing. These are the people who seem to manifest opportunities at an almost supernatural speed, who attract resources and connections with such precision that it appears they're living by different rules entirely, and in a sense they are, not because they're special or chosen, but because they've discovered how to eliminate the interference between their intention and its manifestation. They've learned to tune every aspect of their being, conscious thought, subconscious programming, emotional state, energetic output, into one unified, powerful direction. The results they experience happen so rapidly that it can honestly look dangerous from the outside, as if they're somehow breaking the natural order of things. But here's what's actually happening behind the scenes. Most people operate with massive internal fragmentation. One part of them wants abundance, while another part carries deep-seated beliefs about scarcity. One aspect desires transformation, while another clings desperately to familiar patterns because they feel safe. This internal division doesn't just slow down manifestation, it creates contradictory broadcasts that cancel each other out entirely. It's like trying to drive with one foot on the accelerator and the other on the brake, expending enormous energy while barely moving forward. The people experiencing what looks like dangerously fast results aren't working harder or pushing more intensely. They've simply removed the brake. They've cleared the internal contradictions that were creating resistance, and now their desires flow into form with the natural speed that's always been possible. The hidden truth here is that you've already been manifesting at this accelerated pace your entire life. Every thought you've held with emotional conviction, every belief you've accepted as absolute truth, every expectation you've carried in your energetic field, all of it has been materializing into your experience with remarkable precision. The challenge is that much of this process has been happening unconsciously, driven by programming you inherited rather than intentions you consciously chose. Your subconscious mind, operating in the background like invisible software, has been running patterns and broadcasting signals that you never explicitly authorized. And the universe, neutral and responsive, has been faithfully reflecting those signals back to you as lived experience. This brings us to something crucial that's happening right now, in this very moment. You didn't arrive at this video through simple curiosity or random browsing. There's a deeper mechanism at work, one that operates far beneath the surface of conscious decision-making. You've been invoking this information, calling it toward you through channels you might not even recognize. Every time you felt that restless dissatisfaction with how things are, every moment you sensed there must be more to reality than what you've been taught, every instance you wondered why life feels harder than it needs to be, those weren't just passing thoughts. They were invocations, energetic requests transmitted into the field of infinite possibilities. And now, in perfect timing, the response has arrived. Within you exists a force that's been dormant, not because it disappeared or was taken away, but because you stopped exercising it consciously. Think of it like a muscle that atrophies from disuse. The capacity remains, the fundamental structure is still intact, but it's been sleeping, waiting for the precise moment when you would finally be ready to awaken it. That moment isn't somewhere in your distant future. It's not contingent on you becoming someone different or achieving some external milestone. The moment of awakening is now, in this present awareness, as you begin to recognize what's always been true but temporarily forgotten. The impact of this recognition cannot be overstated. When you realize that you possess this inherent creative power, that you've been wielding it unconsciously your entire life, the entire paradigm shifts. You're no longer a passive recipient of circumstances determined by forces beyond your control. You're the conscious director of your experience, the architect of your reality, operating with tools that have always been available but simply required your intentional activation. The journey from unconscious creation to conscious manifestation doesn't require years of training or specialized knowledge. It requires clarity about what's actually happening beneath the surface of your everyday awareness. If this is starting to click for you, If you can feel something stirring in response to these words, write in the comments, "I'm activating now." What most people don't understand is that this force isn't something you need to hunt down in distant spiritual practices or acquire through years of dedicated study. It's not locked behind complex rituals or available only to those who've reached some elevated state of consciousness. The power you're seeking has been living inside you since before you took your first breath. It's been there in every moment of your life, broadcasting signals into the invisible architecture of reality, preparing circumstances and orchestrating encounters long before your conscious mind even recognized what you needed. Your spiritual availability, that openness to transformation that brought you to this exact moment, is itself evidence that the preparation has already been happening behind the scenes. Think about this carefully. Every single experience in your journey so far, even the ones that felt like setbacks or failures, has been calibrating your internal receiver. The frustrations you've encountered weren't random obstacles meant to discourage you. They were precisely designed tensions, creating the exact pressure needed to crack open the shell of old programming and make space for expanded awareness. The restlessness you felt, that nagging sense that there must be more, wasn't discontent for its own sake. It was your deeper intelligence sending signals that you're ready for the next level, that you've outgrown the limitations you've been operating within. The universe doesn't bring you to revelations before you're equipped to integrate them. The fact that you're here now, absorbing this information, means the groundwork has already been laid. But here's where most people get trapped in a cycle that keeps them perpetually separated from what they desire. There's a fundamental difference between wanting something and knowing it's already yours. This distinction might sound subtle, but it creates completely opposite vibrational frequencies. When you desire something from a place of lack, your entire energetic broadcast is screaming, "I don't have this." Every time you focus on that desire, you're actually reinforcing the experience of its absence. You're creating an emotional relationship with the gap between where you are and where you want to be, and that gap becomes the dominant reality you're manifesting. It's like standing in front of an empty table, staring at the space where food should be and wondering why you remain hungry. Your attention is locked on the emptiness rather than the fulfillment. Certainty operates from an entirely different paradigm. When you have genuine certainty about something, you're not hoping it will arrive or wishing it were true. You're recognizing a reality that already exists at a deeper level, something that's as inevitable as tomorrow's sunrise. Think about how you know your name. There's no effort involved, no emotional charge, no desperate need to convince yourself. You simply know it with such complete naturalness that questioning it would feel absurd. That quality of knowing, that unwavering certainty devoid of anxiety or striving, is the exact frequency that collapses possibilities into physical manifestation. When you can hold that same certainty about your desires, not forcing yourself to believe, but genuinely recognizing them as done deals in the quantum field, the universe has no choice but to reorganize itself to match that frequency. The challenge is that most people have been conditioned to trust only what their physical senses confirm. They wait for evidence before they allow themselves to feel certain, creating a paradox where they can never access the certainty that would actually produce the evidence. It's backward causation. The external world is always a delayed reflection of your internal state. By the time something appears in physical form, it's already old news vibrationally. The real creation happened in the invisible realm of frequency and consciousness, sometimes weeks or months before the material manifestation occurred. If you're waiting for your circumstances to change before you shift your vibration, you're guaranteeing that nothing will ever change because you're locked in a loop where external conditions determine internal states, and internal states can't shift without different external conditions. Breaking this cycle requires a decision that might feel uncomfortable at first. You have to be willing to claim certainty before you see proof. You have to occupy the emotional frequency of having before the physical evidence appears. This isn't delusion or denial, it's understanding how causation actually works in a vibrational universe. The transformation happens the moment you stop relating to your desires as future possibilities you're chasing and start relating to them as present realities you're simply allowing to unfold in their perfect timing. If this understanding is landing differently for you now, if you can sense the distinction between wanting and knowing, write in the comments, "I'm shifting to certainty." The shift into certainty becomes remarkably simple when you understand what it actually feels like. Right now, wherever you are physically located, you have a certain knowing about your environment. You don't need to convince yourself that you're sitting or standing where you are. There's no internal debate about whether the room around you exists. You're not repeating affirmations to believe in the chair beneath you or the floor under your feet. The knowing is so natural, so effortless, that it doesn't even register as knowledge. It's just obvious reality. That's the exact frequency you're aiming for with your desires. When you can relate to your intended manifestations with that same quality of natural certainty, when they feel as undeniable as your current physical location, you've unlocked the vibrational code that activates the fastest and most precise results. Most people never experience this because they're constantly trying to manufacture certainty through mental effort. They're forcing positive thoughts, battling against doubt, working exhaustingly hard to maintain belief in what they want. But genuine certainty doesn't require effort. It doesn't need defense or constant reinforcement. It simply exists as a quiet, unshakable knowing that rests beneath all the mental noise. When you achieve this state, manifestation stops feeling like a mysterious process you're trying to control and starts feeling like a natural unfolding you're simply witnessing. The difference in results is staggering. Here's the revelation that changes everything once you truly grasp it. The sure abundance you're seeking, the opportunities you're pursuing, the relationships you're longing for, the success you're working toward, none of it needs to be created from scratch. It already exists. Right now, in this present moment, everything you desire is available in your field of potential reality. The problem isn't that these things are absent. The problem is that your current frequency of perception can't detect them. It's like having a radio that's perfectly functional but tuned to the wrong station. The music you want to hear is being broadcast constantly. The signal is strong and clear, but you're listening to static because your receiver isn't calibrated correctly. There's an old story about a traveler lost in the desert, dying of thirst, convinced he would never find water. He dragged himself across the sand for days, his throat burning, his hope fading, until finally he collapsed in exhaustion. And in that moment of surrender, he opened his eyes and saw a well directly in front of him. The well had been there the entire time. It hadn't appeared magically in response to his suffering. He had probably walked past it multiple times without seeing it because his perception was clouded by desperation and fear. The well only revealed itself when his internal state shifted enough to allow recognition. This isn't just a metaphorical teaching. It's describing exactly how opportunities and resources function in your actual life. If something shifted for you while watching this, show it by hitting the like button. It's a simple gesture, but it helps this message reach others who need to hear it right now. Your current perception is shaped by the beliefs you're carrying, the emotional patterns you're running, the expectations you've accepted as truth. These factors create a perceptual filter that literally determines what enters your awareness and what remains invisible despite being right in front of you. Two people can walk through the exact same environment and have completely different experiences because their perceptual filters are tuned to different frequencies. One person sees obstacles everywhere while the other sees openings. One notices lack and limitation, while the other recognizes abundance and possibility. The external reality hasn't changed. The internal calibration has. The transformation you're seeking isn't about making the universe deliver something it's currently withholding. It's about elevating your perception to the frequency where what's already available becomes visible. Every solution to every problem you're facing already exists. Every resource you need for your next level is already in circulation. Every person who could catalyze your breakthrough is already alive and moving through the world. The question isn't whether these things exist. They absolutely do. The question is whether you've raised your vibrational frequency high enough to perceive them when they cross your path, to recognize them when they appear, to receive them when they're offered. Now, I want to reveal something that operates beneath even this level of understanding, because there's a mechanism that determines whether your perception can elevate at all. If you're starting to see how your current reality might be limited by perception rather than by actual scarcity, write in the comments, "I'm ready to see more." The mechanism that determines whether your perception can shift is something most people completely overlook because they're focused on the wrong kind of preparation. When someone decides they want to change their life, the automatic response is usually to gather more information. They buy courses, read books, attend seminars, accumulate theories and techniques and strategies. And while knowledge can be valuable, it often becomes a sophisticated form of procrastination. You can study manifestation for years without ever actually manifesting anything significant because you're preparing externally when the real work happens in an entirely different dimension of your being. The preparation that actually matters occurs behind the scenes of your consciousness, in spaces that no course can access and no teacher can navigate for you. It's the quiet dismantling of beliefs you didn't even know you were carrying. It's the subtle shift in how you relate to uncertainty and discomfort. It's the gradual release of emotional patterns that have been running on autopilot since childhood. This internal transformation doesn't announce itself with fanfare. There are no certificates or milestones marking your progress, but this invisible work determines absolutely everything about what you're capable of perceiving and therefore experiencing in your external reality. Think of your internal state as a lens through which all of reality is filtered before it reaches your awareness. If that lens is scratched, clouded, or distorted by unexamined assumptions and unresolved emotional debris, then everything you look at will appear warped. You could be standing in the middle of extraordinary opportunity and see only obstacles. You could be surrounded by willing helpers and perceive only competition. You could have access to abundant resources and experience only scarcity. The external circumstances haven't determined your experience. Your internal lens has shaped what you're able to recognize and receive. This is why two people can exist in virtually identical situations and have radically different outcomes. Same industry, same economic conditions, same starting resources, yet one person thrives while the other struggles. The difference isn't in their circumstances, it's in the calibration of their perceptual lens. One person's internal state allows them to notice possibilities that the other person's filter automatically dismisses as irrelevant or impossible. One recognizes synchronicities and acts on them, while the other experiences the same moments as meaningless coincidence. One feels naturally aligned with abundance because their lens isn't distorted by shame or unworthiness, while the other can't even imagine deserving what they desire because their lens has been warped by years of negative conditioning. The profound implication here is that you're never actually stuck because of your external circumstances. You're only stuck because of how your internal lens is interpreting those circumstances. And unlike external conditions, which can take time and effort to shift, your internal calibration can change in an instant. A single insight can dissolve a belief structure that's been limiting you for decades. One genuine emotional release can clear a perceptual distortion that's been filtering your entire reality. The moment your lens shifts, your world transforms, not because anything external has changed, but because you're suddenly able to see what was always there. This is the hidden truth that separates those who break through from those who remain trapped in cycles of effort without results. The breakthrough doesn't come from working harder on external strategies. It comes from doing the unsexy, unglamorous internal work that nobody sees. It's examining honestly what you actually believe about yourself, about money, about relationships, about success, about your worthiness to receive. It's feeling the uncomfortable emotions you've been avoiding instead of constantly distracting yourself from them. It's questioning the stories you've been telling about why things are the way they are, and being willing to construct entirely new narratives. The impact of this internal recalibration cannot be overstated. When your lens clears even slightly, opportunities that were previously invisible suddenly become obvious. Connections that would have passed you by now capture your attention. Resources that existed all along finally register in your awareness. And the beautiful paradox is that the less you focus on changing your external world and the more you commit to cleaning your internal lens, the faster your external world begins to transform in ways that feel almost miraculous. If this resonates with your experience, if you're recognizing where your own lens might need recalibration, write in the comments, "Clearing my lens." Now I want to reveal something about the mechanics of how you're actually connected to the creative intelligence of the universe. You were born with an instrument that most people go their entire lives without consciously recognizing. It's not symbolic or abstract. It's as functionally real as your nervous system or your cardiovascular network. Think of it as a cosmic antenna, an energetic receiving and transmitting device that operates continuously whether you're aware of it or not. This antenna picks up information from fields of possibility that exist beyond your 5 physical senses. It receives intuitive guidance, recognizes synchronistic patterns, and broadcasts your intentions into the quantum field where physical manifestation begins. The fascinating thing about this antenna is that it never stops working. Even when you're completely unaware of its existence, it's still transmitting and receiving, still exchanging information with the intelligent universe that surrounds you. Those sudden insights that seem to come from nowhere, those gut feelings that prove accurate despite contradicting logic, those moments when you think of someone seconds before they call you, these aren't random neurological events. They're evidence of your antenna functioning exactly as it was designed to function, picking up signals from dimensions of reality that most people have been trained to ignore or dismiss as imagination. But here's what creates the massive difference in results between people who seem effortlessly connected to guidance and opportunity versus those who feel perpetually lost and struggling. It's not that some people were born with superior equipment. The antenna you have is fundamentally the same as the antenna in every other human being. The determining factor is the level of interference distorting your signal. Imagine trying to have a phone conversation while standing next to construction equipment, jet engines and car alarms all blaring simultaneously. The person on the other end is speaking clearly, but you can't hear them through the noise. That's what's happening for most people energetically. The universe is broadcasting clear signals constantly, but the internal interference is so loud that the messages get completely drowned out. This interference takes forms that most people never identify because it operates in the background of their awareness. There are the inherited fear patterns you absorbed from your family lineage without ever consciously choosing them. There's the critical voice that sounds like various authority figures from your past, commenting negatively on everything you attempt. There are belief systems you downloaded from culture and society that have nothing to do with your authentic truth, but run like background software, determining what you perceive as possible or impossible. There are unresolved emotional wounds, creating static in your energetic field, distorting every signal that passes through them. The impact of this interference is devastating in ways that are hard to fully comprehend until you experience what happens when it clears. Your antenna might be receiving brilliant guidance about which direction to move, which opportunity to pursue, which person to connect with, but if the interference is high, that guidance gets scrambled into confusion. The clear signal becomes garbled noise. What should arrive as an obvious next step instead feels like paralyzing uncertainty. What should register as an exciting possibility instead triggers anxiety and doubt. You end up making decisions based on the distorted signal rather than the clear transmission, and then wonder why your life keeps taking you in circles instead of forward movement. The beautiful revelation in all of this is that you don't need to acquire a better antenna. You already have exactly what you need. The transformation happens when you begin identifying and clearing the interference that's been blocking your natural connection. Every limiting belief you examine and release removes a layer of static. Every emotional wound you allow yourself to feel and integrate clears another channel. Every inherited fear pattern you consciously choose to reject instead of perpetuate reduces the background noise just a bit more. And as the interference diminishes, your antenna begins functioning with increasing clarity. Guidance that was always being transmitted suddenly becomes audible. Synchronicities that were always occurring suddenly become visible. Opportunities that were always available suddenly become obvious. What most people are chasing externally is actually an internal recalibration away from interference and toward clear signal reception. The answers you're seeking aren't hidden in some distant place, requiring years of searching. They're being broadcast to you right now, waiting for your antenna to clear enough to receive them. If you're recognizing what might be creating interference in your own signal, write in the comments, "I'm clearing the static." The interference running through your internal system is more complex than most people realize, and part of what makes it so insidious is that much of it doesn't even originate with you. You're carrying fears that belong to your grandparents, anxieties that your great-grandparents passed down through invisible channels of family consciousness. These aren't just psychological theories. There's actual research showing that trauma and stress responses can be transmitted epigenetically across generations. You might be afraid of financial instability, not because you've experienced it personally, but because 3 generations back, your ancestors lived through devastating poverty, and that terror imprinted itself into the family lineage. You inherited it the same way you inherited eye color or bone structure, except nobody told you it wasn't actually yours to carry. Then there are the voices. Not auditory hallucinations, but those internal commentators that narrate your life with relentless criticism. When you're about to try something new, and that voice says, "Who do you think you are?" or "You're going to embarrass yourself," that's not your authentic inner wisdom speaking. That's an internalized recording of someone from your past, a parent, a teacher, a sibling, someone whose judgment you absorbed so completely that it became indistinguishable from your own thoughts. These voices are remarkably convincing because they've been playing in your head for so long that you mistake them for truth rather than recognizing them as outdated programming from people who were themselves operating from their own wounds and limitations. Beyond the inherited fears and critical voices, there's an entire architecture of beliefs you've adopted without ever consciously examining whether they're actually true for you. You believe certain things about money, relationships, success, your own capabilities, not because you carefully evaluated evidence and came to informed conclusions, but because everyone around you seemed to accept these beliefs as obvious facts. The invisible agreements of collective consciousness are incredibly powerful. If everyone in your environment believes that financial security requires decades of grueling work, you'll likely adopt that belief automatically. If the culture you grew up in treats creative pursuits as impractical fantasies, you'll probably internalize that perspective. These collective beliefs create interference because they override your antenna's ability to receive signals that contradict the accepted narrative. And perhaps most challenging to identify are the thought patterns that have become so automatic they feel like part of your identity. The tendency to catastrophize, to assume the worst, to focus on what could go wrong rather than what could go right. These aren't personality traits you were born with. They're learned responses, habitual neural pathways that got reinforced over time until they became your default mode of processing information. You don't choose these patterns consciously in the moment. They just run automatically, creating a baseline frequency of anxiety or pessimism that colors everything passing through your awareness. Here's what changes everything about this situation. None of these forms of interference are permanent features of who you are. They're not hardwired into your being at some unchangeable level. They're conditioning, which means they can be unconditioned. They're programming, which means they can be reprogrammed. Think of them as software rather than hardware. The fundamental equipment, your cosmic antenna, your capacity for clear connection, that's hardware. It came with you and can't be damaged or diminished, but the interference creating all the problems is just software, and software can be updated, modified, or completely uninstalled. The transformation process is simpler than you might imagine, though it requires consistent attention. Every time you catch yourself running one of these patterns and pause to question it, is this actually true? Is this thought serving me? Does this belief reflect my authentic experience? Or just something I absorbed from others? You're initiating a cleaning process. That moment of conscious examination disrupts the automatic loop. The pattern loses a bit of its power. The interference decreases slightly. And if you continue this practice, consistently identifying and questioning the programming instead of blindly accepting it, the cumulative effect is extraordinary. What surprises people most is how quickly things can shift once they commit to this internal cleaning. You're not excavating decades of psychological debris one painful session at a time. You're simply bringing conscious awareness to patterns that only survived because they operated unconsciously. The moment you shine light on them, they begin dissolving. If you're ready to start actively identifying these patterns in your own experience, write in the comments, "I'm ready to uninstall." The cleaning process I'm describing doesn't follow the timeline most people expect. When you hear about internal transformation and releasing conditioning, you probably imagine years of therapy, decades of meditation practice, or some gradual progression where tiny improvements accumulate slowly over time. But that's not actually how consciousness works when you're engaging it directly. The shifts can happen with a speed that honestly feels shocking if you're not prepared for it. You might identify and release a core limiting belief on a Tuesday afternoon, and by Friday, notice that your entire relationship with money or success or possibility has fundamentally altered. This isn't wishful thinking. It's the natural result of removing obstacles that were blocking your innate clarity. What makes this process exponential rather than linear is that each layer of interference you clear creates more space for the next layer to become visible and accessible. Think of it like cleaning a window that's been covered in years of grime. When you wipe away the first layer of dirt, you can suddenly see that there's more dirt underneath. But now that you can see it, you can clean it too. And with each layer you remove, more light comes through, making it easier to see the remaining obstacles. The first limiting belief you identify and release might take significant effort because you've never consciously examined your programming before, but that act of examination develops a skill, a capacity for self-awareness that makes identifying the second belief faster and easier. By the time you're addressing the third or fourth pattern, you're moving through them with increasing speed because your clarity is building on itself. Before you know it, you're experiencing a level of mental clarity and emotional freedom that you genuinely didn't know was possible. Things that used to trigger intense reactions barely register. Situations that would have sent you spiraling into anxiety now feel manageable. Opportunities you would have automatically dismissed as not for people like me suddenly seem accessible. This isn't because you've become a different person, it's because you've removed the layers of conditioning that were obscuring who you actually are beneath all the programming. Now I want to address something crucial that trips up more people than almost anything else on this journey. There's a fundamental misunderstanding about how the universe receives and responds to your communication. Most people operate under the assumption that if they just say the right words, repeat the right affirmations, declare the right intentions, the universe will hear and respond accordingly. So they stand in front of mirrors every morning saying, "I am abundant, I am successful, I am worthy," with the same energy you'd use to recite a grocery list, and then wonder why nothing changes in their actual experience. Here's the truth that completely reframes how manifestation actually works. The universe is not listening to your words. It can't hear language the way humans do because it doesn't have ears or a brain that processes verbal communication. What the universe reads with absolute precision is your vibration, the energetic frequency you're emitting through your emotional state, your nervous system activation, your subconscious beliefs, your body's biochemical signature. Words are just vibrations in air, easily spoken and equally easily meaningless if they're not backed by corresponding frequency. When you say, "I am abundant," while your chest is tight with financial anxiety, while your mind is running catastrophic scenarios about unpaid bills, while your body is flooded with stress hormones because you checked your bank balance this morning and felt that familiar sinking feeling, the vibrational message you're broadcasting has nothing to do with abundance. You're sending a clear, powerful signal of scarcity, fear, and lack. And the universe, being the perfect mirror that it is, reflects that signal back to you as continued experiences of financial struggle, not because it's punishing you or ignoring your affirmations, but because it's responding with mathematical precision to the actual frequency you're transmitting. This is why people can spend years doing affirmations, creating vision boards, and following manifestation techniques without seeing significant results. They're focused entirely on the superficial layer of words and images, while the deep layer of vibrational frequency remains completely misaligned with what they're claiming to want. It's like trying to tune into a radio station by writing down the station's call letters instead of actually turning the dial to the correct frequency. The letters are correct, but they're not what determines what you hear through the speakers. If you're beginning to recognize the disconnect between what you've been saying and what you've actually been vibrating, write in the comments, "I see the real signal." Understanding this distinction between surface communication and vibrational truth changes everything about how you approach creating your reality. Every single time you express an intention, whether through spoken words, written affirmations, or even silent thoughts, you're essentially sending a data package into the quantum field. But that package contains two completely different types of information that most people don't realize are being transmitted simultaneously. On the surface level, there's the explicit content, the actual words you're using, the conscious thought you're thinking, the declared intention you're stating. This is the part you're aware of, the part you carefully craft and repeat, the part you assume is doing the heavy lifting in your manifestation work. But underneath that surface layer, there's something far more powerful being transmitted. It's the vibrational code, the emotional signature, the energetic frequency, the somatic state of your nervous system, the subconscious beliefs humming in the background. This deeper layer is what carries the real information about your actual state of being. And here's what most people never realize until they understand why their manifestation attempts keep failing. The universe completely ignores that surface content. It doesn't matter how perfectly you word your affirmations or how many times you repeat your intentions. Those words could be poetry or gibberish. The universe isn't reading them. What it's reading with absolute precision is that deeper vibrational code, that energetic signature that reveals what you genuinely believe and feel beneath your conscious declarations. This is why you can declare abundance while vibrating scarcity and get more scarcity. You can affirm confidence while emanating insecurity and attract situations that reinforce your insecurity. You can claim you're ready for love while broadcasting unworthiness and continue experiencing rejection. The mismatch between what you're saying and what you're vibrating creates exactly the kind of confused, contradictory results that leave people feeling like manifestation is random or doesn't work. But it's working perfectly. It's just responding to the signal you're actually sending, not the signal you think you're sending. The challenging revelation here is that vibrational authenticity cannot be manufactured or performed. You can't fake your way to the right frequency any more than you could fake your way through a lie detector test administered by someone who can read every subtle shift in your physiology. The universe is essentially a cosmic lie detector with infinite sensitivity. It reads the micro-expressions of your energy field, the barely perceptible tensions in your emotional body, the whispered doubts in the quietest corners of your subconscious. When there's incongruence between what you're claiming and what you're actually experiencing internally, that incongruence is the loudest part of your signal. This isn't meant to discourage you, it's meant to redirect your efforts toward what actually works. Instead of trying to say the right things while feeling the wrong things, you need to address the feeling layer first. You need to work with the actual vibration you're emitting, which means getting brutally honest with yourself about what's really going on beneath your carefully constructed positive affirmations. If you're declaring prosperity while feeling terrified about money, the work isn't to say, "I'm prosperous," more convincingly. The work is to address the terror, to examine where it comes from, to question whether it's based on current reality or old programming, and to consciously shift your relationship with financial security from a place of genuine internal transformation rather than surface performance. The beautiful paradox is that when you stop trying to fake vibrational alignment and start doing the real work of creating actual alignment, the words become almost unnecessary. When your internal state genuinely shifts, when you've cleared enough interference that you're actually feeling abundant or confident or worthy, you don't need to convince the universe of anything. Your natural emanation broadcasts that reality automatically. You might still use affirmations, but now they're confirmation of an internal truth rather than desperate attempts to override an internal contradiction. The universe responds to this authentic vibration with a speed and precision that can honestly feel startling because you're finally speaking its language fluently. What this means practically is that your manifestation work needs to shift from being primarily mental and verbal to being primarily emotional and energetic. The question isn't, what should I say or think? It's, what do I actually need to feel? And what internal blocks are preventing me from accessing that feeling authentically? If you're recognizing where you've been trying to perform the right vibration instead of cultivating it genuinely, write in the comments, "I choose authentic." Alignment Now I want to share something that illustrates exactly what authentic vibrational alignment looks like when it's operating at full strength. Imagine a lighthouse keeper standing in his tower during the most violent storm imaginable. Rain hammering against the glass, wind threatening to tear the structure from its foundation, waves crashing with such force that the entire building shakes. In that chaos, the keeper's job is simple, but absolutely critical. Keep the light burning. But here's what determines whether that light actually saves lives or becomes irrelevant. It's not primarily about the technical specifications of the lamp itself. It's about the keeper's conviction. When that keeper maintains unwavering certainty that the light will reach the ships that need it, when there's zero doubt or wavering in that internal knowing, something extraordinary happens. The light somehow penetrates farther than it should according to physical measurements. Ships that should be beyond visual range report seeing it clearly. The conviction amplifies the signal in ways that defy conventional logic. Your manifestation power operates on this exact same principle. The strength of your creative capacity isn't determined by how elaborate your techniques are or how many hours you spend visualizing. It's determined by the depth and stability of your conviction. When you hold unwavering certainty about your desired reality, when that knowing is so solid that external circumstances can't shake it, you're functioning as that lighthouse keeper in the storm. Your conviction amplifies your vibrational signal exponentially, cutting through the interference and chaos to broadcast with a clarity that the universe cannot help but respond to. But the moment doubt creeps in, the moment you start questioning whether this actually works or checking anxiously for evidence, your signal weakens. Not because the universe stopped listening, but because your transmission lost coherence. The challenge for most people is that they're trying to maintain conviction while simultaneously looking at a reality that contradicts what they're trying to manifest. And this brings us to perhaps the most profound understanding about why your perception might be limited in the first place. You're not seeing reality as it actually is. You're seeing it through layers of invisible filters that distort everything before it reaches your conscious awareness. These filters function like veils, and most people spend their entire lives never realizing these veils exist because they're so accustomed to the filtered view that they mistake it for objective reality. The first of these veils creates the illusion of separation, the deep feeling that you're fundamentally isolated from the creative source of existence. You experience yourself as a tiny, separate entity in a vast, indifferent universe, rather than recognizing yourself as a unique expression of that universe experiencing itself. This separation is perhaps the most foundational distortion because it strips you of your inherent creative authority. When you feel separate, you're always asking permission, always seeking validation from something outside yourself, never quite trusting your own connection to the intelligence that creates galaxies. Then there's the veil of limitation, that persistent belief in invisible ceilings that supposedly exist for you specifically. You look at what others have achieved and somehow convince yourself that those possibilities are available to them, but not to you. This veil doesn't announce itself obviously. It works subtly, through quiet assumptions about what people like you can or cannot do, should or should not attempt. It creates boundaries in your imagination before you even begin to take action toward your desires. Closely related is the veil of unworthiness, that insidious whisper suggesting you don't actually deserve the abundance, love, success, or joy you desire. This one is particularly destructive because it disguises itself as humility or realism. You might consciously want something while unconsciously believing you're not good enough to receive it. And that unconscious belief broadcasts louder than your conscious desire every single time. The veil of victimhood follows naturally, convincing you that you're primarily shaped by circumstances beyond your control rather than being the primary creative force in your own experience. When this veil is operating, you're always explaining your limitations by pointing to external factors, never quite recognizing your own agency in perpetuating the patterns you claim to want to escape. Perhaps most pervasive is the veil of scarcity, training you to see lack and limitation even when surrounded by abundance. This veil doesn't just affect how you view material resources, it shapes how you perceive opportunities, time, love, possibility itself. Everything gets filtered through a lens of not enough, creating an anxiety-driven approach to life that ironically repels the very abundance you're seeking. If you're beginning to recognize which veils have been filtering your perception of reality, write in the comments, "I see through the veils." Now, I want to give you a practice that can actually help dissolve these veils, a technique that's disarmingly simple but profoundly effective when you engage with it sincerely. When you have a moment of privacy and quietness, close your eyes and bring your attention to the very top of your head. Visualize a golden antenna beginning to emerge from your crown. But this isn't some ordinary mechanical device. Imagine it as a luminous spiral of light, radiant and alive, extending upward from your being with no limitations. Watch it rise through the ceiling of wherever you are, continuing up through the atmosphere, piercing through layers of reality that your physical eyes can't perceive. This antenna keeps ascending, moving through dimensions of existence, traversing frequencies of consciousness, climbing without hesitation or restriction until it finally merges with the eternal pulse of the universe itself, that infinite intelligence that's been broadcasting to you your entire life. This isn't just creative imagination without purpose. What you're actually doing with this visualization is activating energetic circuitry that exists whether you're conscious of it or not. You're strengthening your connection to that cosmic intelligence, clearing the channels of communication, and most importantly, reminding your entire system that you're not separate from the source of creation. You're an extension of it, a localized expression of infinite creative power. When you practice this even briefly, you often notice subtle shifts immediately. Mental clarity increases, intuitive hits become more frequent, synchronicities multiply. These aren't coincidental side effects. They're evidence that you've tuned your antenna more, precisely to the frequencies that were always there waiting for you to receive them. The reason this practice works has everything to do with the actual nature of reality itself, which is radically different from what you were probably taught to believe. Look around at your environment right now. Everything you see appears solid, fixed, unchangeable. The walls seem permanent. The furniture looks dense and immovable. Your own body feels like a solid mass occupying space. But this perception of solidity is one of the most convincing illusions existence has ever created. If you could zoom into any object at the subatomic level, the solidity would completely disappear. What you'd find instead are vibrating patterns of energy with vast empty space between particles. The atoms that supposedly make up solid matter are themselves almost entirely empty space. The actual material substance is so infinitesimally small compared to the emptiness that it's more accurate to say everything is mostly nothing. This isn't spiritual philosophy divorced from science. This is what quantum physics has been confirming for over a century. Matter as we experience it is essentially frozen energy, vibration, that's oscillating at frequencies slow enough and dense enough to register to our limited sensory apparatus as solid. But that apparent solidity is temporary, malleable, responsive to consciousness in ways that completely contradict our everyday assumptions about how reality works. The table in front, of you isn't actually the fixed, unchangeable object it appears to be. It's a pattern of energy in constant flux, held together by forces and frequencies that could theoretically reorganize into entirely different forms if the right conditions emerged. And here's where this understanding becomes transformative for your manifestation capacity. If reality is fundamentally malleable rather than fixed, if it's responsive energy rather than inert matter, then your consciousness isn't just observing a pre-existing world. It's participating in the continuous creation of that world. The thoughts you think, the emotions you feel, the beliefs you hold. These aren't just internal experiences happening in isolation from external reality. They're vibrational inputs affecting the energetic field that organizes itself into the physical experiences you encounter. You're not trying to manipulate a solid, resistant universe into giving you what you want. You're learning to consciously direct the fluid, responsive energy that's already reorganizing itself moment by moment based on the signals it receives from your consciousness. The impact of this shift in understanding cannot be overstated. When you truly grasp that reality is malleable, that it's not the fixed thing your senses report, but rather an energetic dance responding to consciousness, your entire approach to creating change transforms. You stop feeling like you're pushing against immovable obstacles and start recognizing that you're working with responsive energy that's actually waiting for clearer direction from you. If this is fundamentally shifting how you understand what's actually possible, write in the comments. Reality is responsive. There's a story that perfectly illustrates this shift from seeing reality as fixed to recognizing it as responsive. And it's about a woman named Leora who lived her entire existence surrounded by thick, persistent fog. From her earliest memories, all she knew was a grey, diffuse world, where colors appeared muted and washed out, where shapes were vague shadows in the distance, where clarity simply didn't exist as part of her experience. She adapted to this foggy reality, built her life within its limitations, assumed that this grey, unclear world was simply how things were for everyone. She had no reference point for anything different, no way to imagine that reality could look fundamentally other than what she'd always known. But one day, something shifted. A warm breeze began to blow, gentle at first, then stronger, and slowly the fog started to dissipate. Layer by layer, the greyness lifted, and what emerged before Leora's astonished eyes was a world she could never have imagined from inside the fog. Emerald valleys, stretched out in colors so vibrant they almost hurt to look at. Mountain peaks covered in pristine snow reflected sunlight with blinding brilliance. Flowers bloomed in intensities of color that seemed impossibly vivid. The world hadn't changed. It had been there the entire time, existing in full color and clarity, while she lived inside the fog. What changed was her perception, her ability to see what was always present, but previously invisible to her. This is your story too. The fog you've been living in isn't made of water vapor. It's made of those veils we discussed, those layers of conditioning and limiting beliefs and inherited programming that have been filtering your perception of what's actually available to you. The abundance you're seeking, the opportunities you're pursuing, the life you're trying to create, all of it already exists in the field of possibilities surrounding you right now. It's not hidden in some distant future requiring years of struggle to reach. It's here, as present and real as those mountains and valleys were during all of Leora's foggy years. The only thing preventing you from experiencing it is the fog of limited perception. And just like in the story, when that fog begins to clear, when those veils start to lift, you don't discover a new reality, you discover reality as it's always been, just finally visible to you. The transformation happens through learning to speak the language that cuts through fog instantly, the primordial communication system that's been operating since before human words existed. This is the language the universe has always understood with perfect clarity, the dialect of pure energy and vibration. Before there were cultures or civilizations, before spoken language developed into the thousands of forms we use today, there was this fundamental mode of communication. It's completely non-verbal, operating at frequencies that transcend the need for translation or interpretation. When you communicate in this language, there's zero possibility of being misunderstood because it bypasses all the confusion and distortion that words create. Every thought you have carries an energetic signature. Every emotion you feel broadcasts a specific frequency. Every belief you hold emits a vibration into the field. This is the actual communication happening beneath all your words, underneath all your conscious intentions, deeper than any affirmation you could speak. And the universe responds to this energy language with absolute precision, because it's the only language existence fundamentally speaks. When you say, "I want abundance," but your energy is screaming scarcity, the universe isn't confused about which message to respond to. It hears only the energy, only the vibration, and delivers experiences that match that frequency exactly. The beautiful revelation here is that you already speak this language fluently. You've been speaking it your entire life without realizing it. Every cell in your body knows this dialect. Every atom of your being communicates in these frequencies naturally. The challenge isn't learning a new language, it's becoming conscious of the language you're already speaking so you can direct it intentionally instead of broadcasting mixed signals unconsciously. When you align your energetic communication consciously, when every level of your being is speaking the same message in this primordial tongue, the response from reality can be so immediate it honestly startles people. If you're ready to become fluent in the language you've been speaking unconsciously, write in the comments, "I speak in frequency." Now I want to reveal the specific elements that need to align when you're speaking this energetic language consciously. Think of it like a symphony where every instrument must play its part in perfect harmony to create something that moves people at a soul level. When 5 fundamental aspects of your being vibrate together in absolute synchrony, they form what I call the perfect melody of manifestation, a frequency so coherent and powerful that reality has no choice but to reorganize itself in response. The first element is intention, functioning as the invisible rudder that steers your entire energetic vessel. Without clear intention, your energy disperses in all directions like unfocused light. But when you establish a precise intention, all that scattered energy becomes a concentrated beam, pointing exactly where you want it to go. This isn't about vague wishes or general preferences. It's about knowing with absolute clarity what you're calling into your experience and why it matters to you at the deepest level. The second element is attention, which operates like a magnifying glass, concentrating the light of your consciousness onto a single point. Whatever receives your sustained attention grows in your experience. This isn't metaphorical. Neuroscience confirms that attention literally shapes neural pathways and influences what your brain prioritizes as important enough to notice. When you combine clear intention with focused attention, you create a magnetic field around your desired reality that begins pulling relevant information, people, and circumstances toward you. The third element is emotion, the sacred fire that breathes life into everything else. You can have the clearest intention and the most focused attention, but without the right emotional frequency, your manifestation lacks the energetic fuel it needs to materialize quickly. Emotion is what transforms a cold thought into a living, breathing reality. When you can genuinely feel the emotional state of already having what you desire, not forcing it or faking it, but authentically accessing that frequency, you're accelerating the manifestation process exponentially because you're matching your vibration to the reality you're calling in. The fourth element is expectation, that invisible magnet drawing your desired reality toward you through time and space. Genuine expectation isn't hope or wishful thinking, it's a quiet certainty that what you've requested is already on its way. It's the same quality of knowing you have when expecting a package you've ordered online. You don't obsess over whether it will arrive. You don't check the mailbox anxiously every 5 minutes. You simply know it's coming, and you go about your life with that settled expectation humming in the background. The fifth element completes the circuit: gratitude. But this isn't the gratitude you feel after receiving something. This is the radical practice of being grateful before the physical manifestation appears, appreciating what exists in the invisible realm of potential before it collapses into form. This anticipatory gratitude sends a powerful signal that you trust the process completely, that you recognize your desires are already fulfilled at the energetic level, even if your physical eyes can't see the evidence yet. When these 5 elements align and resonate together, something remarkable happens in your consciousness. You begin to notice a shift in how you relate to your own thoughts and emotions. Instead of being completely identified with every mental pattern that crosses your awareness, you start recognizing that there's a part of you that can observe those patterns without getting swept away by them. This is what I call the inner witness. A silent presence at the very center of your being that simply watches without judgment, without reactivity, without getting emotionally entangled in the drama of your mental landscape. Most people live their entire lives completely fused with their thoughts, believing that every passing idea deserves their belief and every emotion requires their participation. But awakening to the inner witness changes this completely. You realize you're not your thoughts. You're the awareness that observes thoughts. You're not your emotions. You're the spacious consciousness in which emotions arise and dissolve. This distinction might sound subtle, but it's actually the most powerful shift you can make because it gives you the ability to choose which thoughts to engage with and which to simply let pass like clouds moving through the sky. If you're sensing this observing presence becoming more apparent in your own experience, write in the comments, "I am the witness." The power of this inner witness goes far beyond just observing your internal landscape with detachment. What quantum physics has been revealing for over a century is that observation itself is a creative act, not a passive one. When you observe something at the subatomic level, the very act of observation causes the quantum wave function to collapse from a state of infinite possibility into one specific reality. Before observation, a particle exists in what's called superposition, simultaneously in multiple states, all possibilities happening at once. The moment conscious observation occurs, all those possibilities collapse into a single outcome. This isn't just theoretical speculation. It's been demonstrated in laboratory experiments thousands of times. Now here's where this becomes directly relevant to your everyday experience. The same principle that operates at the quantum level operates at the level of your thoughts and emotional patterns. When you bring conscious awareness to a thought or belief, when you observe it from that witness perspective rather than being completely identified with it, you're actually changing its nature. A thought that had power over you when it was running unconsciously suddenly becomes just a mental event when you observe it consciously. It loses its automatic authority. It becomes malleable, workable, something you can choose to engage with or simply let dissolve. This is why people who develop strong witness consciousness often report that problems that plagued them for years suddenly lose their grip. It's not that they fought against those patterns or forced them away. They simply observed them clearly, and the observation itself initiated a transformation. The anxious thought that used to trigger a cascade of panic becomes just a thought about anxiety that you can watch arise and pass without getting swept into its story. The limiting belief that used to constrain your actions becomes just a belief I've been carrying that you can examine objectively and decide whether it actually serves you. But there's something even more fundamental we need to address about the creative power you're wielding constantly, whether you realize it or not. Your thoughts aren't just ephemeral mental events floating harmlessly through your consciousness without consequence. They're active creation tools, instruments of incredible precision that are sculpting your reality minute by minute, hour after hour, with an accuracy that most people never recognize because they're not paying attention to the correlation between their dominant thought patterns and their lived experiences. Each thought you entertain, especially those you dwell on repeatedly, emits a specific signal into the quantum field of infinite possibilities. That signal acts like a homing beacon, attracting circumstances, people, and events that match its frequency. When you think thoughts of abundance repeatedly, you're broadcasting a signal that organizes reality toward experiences of abundance. When you think thoughts of lack, you're sending out a different signal that magnetizes experiences of scarcity. This isn't about positive thinking as a superficial strategy. It's about understanding that thoughts are energetic transmissions with real effects on the responsive field that surrounds you. The challenge is that most people are completely unconscious of what they're thinking for the majority of their waking hours. They're running on autopilot, recycling the same thought patterns they've been thinking for years, broadcasting the same signals endlessly, and then wondering why their life looks essentially the same year after year. They're literally using their thoughts as creation tools, but they're creating unconsciously by default, according to habitual patterns rather than conscious intention. And those habitual patterns are usually based on old programming, inherited beliefs and reactions to past experiences, rather than clear vision for what they actually want to experience. When you activate the inner witness, you gain the ability to catch yourself in these unconscious thought loops. You notice when you're thinking the same limiting thoughts for the 1,000th time. You become aware of the moment when your mind starts spinning catastrophic scenarios about the future or replaying painful moments from the past. And in that moment of noticing, you have a choice. You can continue riding that thought train to its predictable destination, or you can consciously redirect your mental energy toward thoughts that actually align with where you want to go. If you're beginning to recognize the creative power you've been wielding unconsciously through your thoughts, write in the comments, "My thoughts are tools." The redirecting of your mental energy toward thoughts that serve you becomes especially powerful when you understand something about the speed at which manifestation can actually occur. There's this widespread belief that bringing desires into reality requires long timelines, years of patient effort, gradual accumulation of results over extended periods. But that's only true when there's interference in the signal, when your thought is completely clean, when there's zero contamination from subconscious doubts or contradictory beliefs running in the background. Manifestation can happen at the literal speed of thought. The time between thinking something with absolute certainty and experiencing its manifestation can collapse to almost nothing. This sounds impossible only because most people have never experienced a truly clean thought. What they call thinking is actually a messy cocktail of conscious intention mixed with unconscious doubt, desire blended with fear of not receiving, vision contaminated by memories of past failures. It's like trying to broadcast a clear radio signal while simultaneously transmitting static on the same frequency. The message gets garbled, distorted, weakened. And yes, when you're operating with that much interference, manifestation takes time, because the universe is receiving such a confused signal that it can only respond with confused, delayed results. But when you've done the internal work we've been discussing, when you've cleared enough of the conditioning and released enough of the limiting beliefs, when you've cultivated that witness, consciousness that allows you to catch contradictory thoughts before they contaminate your signal, something extraordinary becomes possible. You can hold a thought with such purity, such singular focus, such complete absence of doubt, that it transmits into the quantum field as a clear, powerful command, and the response can be instantaneous in ways that will genuinely surprise you if you're not prepared for it. I've watched people manifest parking spaces in crowded lots, specific amounts of money from unexpected sources, solutions to problems that seemed impossible, all within minutes or hours of setting a clear intention from a clean mental state. This isn't magic or supernatural intervention. It's simply the natural speed at which reality responds when you're finally speaking its language fluently without interference. The universe isn't slow to respond. You've just been slow to broadcast cleanly. And this brings us to perhaps the most fundamental truth about the nature of reality itself, something that completely reframes what you think is possible. We exist in a universe where absolutely everything is in constant vibratory motion. Nothing is static. Nothing is truly solid or immobile. Every single thing you perceive as fixed and unchangeable is actually oscillating at specific frequencies, humming with energetic movement that's invisible to your physical senses, but absolutely real at the fundamental level of existence. You're not a solid object made of dense matter, navigating through a fixed world of other solid objects. That's the illusion your senses create, and it's a useful illusion for navigating everyday life, but it's not the deeper truth. At the most fundamental level, you're a symphony of frequencies, a complex pattern of vibrations interacting continuously with other symphonies of vibration in what's essentially an infinite ocean of energy in constant motion. The chair you're sitting on, the device you're watching this on, the air you're breathing, your own body, all of it is frequency, all of it is vibration, all of it is fundamentally the same energetic substance expressing itself at different rates of oscillation. When you truly grasp this, when it stops being an interesting intellectual concept and becomes your lived understanding of reality, everything shifts. You realize that changing your experience doesn't require moving mountains or overcoming impossible obstacles. It requires changing frequency, and frequency can shift instantly as fast as you can change a thought or an emotion. You're not trying to manipulate solid matter with your consciousness. You're learning to consciously adjust the frequencies you're emanating so they harmonize with the frequencies of the experiences you want to attract. The implications of this are staggering. It means nothing in your reality is as fixed as it appears. Everything is responsive, everything is malleable, everything is potentially transformable because it's all vibration. And vibration can always be tuned to different frequencies. If you're feeling this truth landing at a deeper level than intellectual understanding, write in the comments, "I am frequency itself." Now I want to address what might be the most misunderstood aspect of how manifestation actually works, and it has everything to do with the role emotions play in this vibrational universe we've been exploring. Most people treat emotions as simple biochemical reactions, automatic responses triggered by external circumstances without any greater significance beyond the subjective experience of feeling good or bad. But that understanding is catastrophically incomplete. Your emotions are actually sophisticated vibrational codes, complex energetic signatures that the universal field recognizes and decodes with absolute precision the moment they arise within you. Think of each emotion as a unique frequency broadcast, a specific wave pattern that travels through the quantum field carrying detailed information about your internal state. When you feel fear, you're not just experiencing an unpleasant sensation in your body. You're broadcasting a fear frequency that the responsive universe reads as an order for more circumstances that match that vibration. When you feel gratitude, you're emitting a completely different signal, one that attracts experiences aligned with appreciation and abundance. The universe doesn't judge these emissions as good or bad. It simply responds to them as instructions, organizing reality to mirror back whatever frequency you're predominantly transmitting. This is why people can work incredibly hard, take all the right actions, follow all the strategic advice, and still not achieve the results they're pursuing. Their actions might be aligned with success, but if their emotional state is dominated by anxiety about failure, by fear of not being enough, by stress about scarcity, then those emotional frequencies are broadcasting louder than their actions. And the universe responds to the dominant signal, which in this case is the emotional frequency of lack and fear, rather than the conscious intention of success. What completely transforms this dynamic is understanding that certain emotions function as master keys in the architecture of reality. High-frequency emotions like joy, gratitude, and love aren't just pleasant states you hope to experience someday in the distant future, when you've finally achieved all your goals and resolved all your problems. That's the conventional understanding, and it keeps people trapped in a perpetual state of chasing fulfillment that always stays just out of reach. The truth is exactly inverted from what most people believe. These elevated emotional states aren't rewards you receive after manifestation. They're access codes you use to activate manifestation. When you're genuinely experiencing joy, not forced positivity, but authentic joy that arises from being fully present and aligned with life as it is, you're literally opening portals in the structure of reality itself. You're activating frequencies that make certain outcomes and opportunities accessible that were previously beyond your reach. The same is true for genuine gratitude, not the performative kind where you list things you're supposed to be grateful for while feeling nothing, but the real thing that fills your chest and brings tears to your eyes. That emotional state is a key that unlocks doors most people never even realize exist, because they're waiting to feel grateful after they receive what they want instead of using gratitude as the tool that attracts what they want. Love operates at perhaps the highest frequency of all. And I'm not talking about romantic attachment or conditional affection. I'm referring to that expansive state of unconditional appreciation for existence itself, for the mystery and beauty of being alive, for the miracle of consciousness experiencing reality through your unique perspective. When you can access that frequency, even briefly, you're literally tuning yourself to the same vibration as the creative force that generates galaxies and orchestrates the precise dance of subatomic particles. From that state, manifestation doesn't feel like effort or manipulation. It feels like natural unfolding, like reality reorganizing itself to match your elevated frequency. The profound shift this creates in your approach to life cannot be overstated. Instead of living in the future-focused mindset of, I'll be happy when I achieve this, or I'll feel grateful when I receive that, you begin cultivating these high-frequency emotional states now, regardless of your current circumstances, because you understand they're not rewards for future achievement, but tools for current creation. If this is fundamentally changing how you relate to your own emotional experience, write in the comments, "Emotions are my keys." Now I want to show you something that will help you understand exactly where you are in the manifestation process at any given moment, because there's actually a guidance system operating that most people never learn to read. Think of it as an invisible traffic light that exists between you and every desire you hold. This isn't metaphorical. It's a real energetic indicator that you can learn to sense and interpret with increasing accuracy as your awareness develops. When your internal state is dominated by mental confusion, when contradictory beliefs are fighting For dominance in your subconscious, when doubt and fear are creating constant static in your signal, that traffic light is showing deep red. This doesn't mean the universe is denying you what you want or that you're doing something wrong. It's simply information about your current vibrational state, telling you that there's significant misalignment between your conscious desires and your actual energetic broadcast. Most people experience this red light as frustration, as that feeling of spinning your wheels without getting traction, as the exhausting sense that no matter how hard you try, nothing seems to shift. But understanding what the red light actually indicates transforms your relationship with these experiences completely. Instead of seeing them as evidence that manifestation doesn't work or that you're somehow broken, you recognize them as clear feedback that you need to address the internal contradictions before your desires can materialize. It's not a stop sign telling you to give up. It's a signal directing you toward the internal work that will actually create breakthrough. As you begin doing that work, as you identify and resolve those contradictions we discussed earlier, as you clear the interference and align your thoughts with your emotions, with your beliefs, something shifts. The traffic light transitions to amber, and you start experiencing what I call the threshold of sacred transformation. You're no longer stuck in confusion, but you haven't yet achieved complete coherence. You're in motion, in transition, in that sometimes uncomfortable space between the old patterns that are dissolving and the new reality that hasn't fully formed yet. Many people abandon their journey right here because they interpret the lack of immediate results as failure when they're actually closer than they've ever been to breakthrough. If you persist through the amber phase, if you continue refining your vibration and clearing your signal without getting discouraged by the seeming lack of external evidence, you eventually cross into emerald green. This is the threshold of complete cosmic activation, where every level of your being is broadcasting the same message with perfect clarity. There's no more internal war between what you consciously want and what you subconsciously believe is possible. Your thoughts, emotions, expectations, and energetic signature are all vibrating in harmony, creating a signal so pure and powerful that the universe responds with what can only be described as miraculous precision. Synchronicities multiply, opportunities appear, resources materialize, doors open, not because you've earned them through suffering or proved yourself worthy, but because you've finally achieved the internal alignment that allows what was always available to become visible and accessible. But there's actually a fourth threshold that exists beyond even this green light of manifestation, and it's the most subtle and profound of all. I call it the colorless threshold of sacred reception, and it represents a state where you're no longer even actively manifesting in the conventional sense. You've moved into such complete trust, such absolute knowing, such deep alignment with the flow of life itself, that you're simply receiving with profound gratitude what's already yours. There's no striving, no effort, no anxiety about timing or methods. You've become a clear channel through which the universe expresses its infinite creative potential. And your only role is to remain open, present and grateful as your desires materialize with a naturalness that feels like breathing. If you're sensing which threshold you're currently inhabiting in your own experience, write in the comments, "I see where I am now. Now I want to reveal something that might initially feel uncomfortable, but will ultimately set you free in ways you can't yet imagine." Throughout this entire journey we've been exploring together, through all the techniques and understandings and practices, there's been an underlying assumption that needs to be examined and ultimately dissolved. You've been operating under the belief that you need to find something, acquire something, earn something, or unlock something that exists outside of yourself. You've been searching for a key, waiting for permission, looking for that one final piece of information or technique that will finally give you access to the creative power you've been seeking. But here's the truth that changes everything. The key doesn't exist because the door was never locked. You've been standing in front of an open treasure chest your entire life, convinced it was sealed shut, searching desperately for the key that would grant you access to what's already yours. This isn't a New Age platitude designed to make you feel better. It's describing the actual mechanism of how your relationship with creative power works. The universe never withdrew your authority to create. It was never revoked, never suspended, never made conditional on you proving your worthiness or finding the right formula. You were born with complete creative authority as your inherent birthright. And the only thing that's been keeping you from exercising it is the belief that you needed permission from something or someone external to yourself. This belief gets installed early and reinforced constantly throughout your life. As a child, you learned to look to authority figures for permission to act, to speak, to express yourself, to take up space. That made sense in the context of learning to navigate social systems and stay safe. But somewhere along the way, you generalized that need for external permission to include your relationship with the universe itself. You started believing that you needed certain credentials, certain levels of worthiness, certain amounts of spiritual development before you could claim your creative power. And every time you encountered a teacher, a book, a system promising to give you the key, if you just followed their method perfectly enough, it reinforced the underlying assumption that the key existed somewhere outside of you. The liberation that comes from recognizing this pattern is immediate and profound. You stop waiting, you stop seeking, you stop looking outside yourself for the permission that was never necessary in the first place. And in that moment of recognition, you discover something that's been true all along, but hidden beneath layers of conditioning. There exists a sacred pact between your soul and the infinite intelligence that animates all of existence. This isn't something you need to create or establish. It's already there, already active, already operating, whether you're conscious of it or not. This pact was sealed long before you were born into this physical body, an eternal agreement written into the very structure of your being. It establishes with absolute clarity that the universe will respond to your most authentic intentions with the same reliability and precision that it responds to gravity or electromagnetism. This isn't a reward for being good or special. It's not something you earn through sufficient spiritual practice or positive thinking. It's a fundamental law of how consciousness and reality interact, as dependable and consistent as any physical law that governs material existence. The reason most people never experience this pact in action is that they're broadcasting from layers of conditioning rather than from authentic intention. They're transmitting signals filtered through fear, limited by inherited beliefs, distorted by unworthiness. The pact is still operating, still responding with perfect precision, but it's responding to the actual signal being sent rather than the signal they wish they were sending. When you clear enough of that interference, when you begin broadcasting from your authentic self rather than from your conditioned patterns, you discover that the universe has been listening and responding faithfully all along. If you're ready to claim the authority that was always yours, write in the comments, "I reclaim my birthright." Now I want to walk you through what actually happens when you begin operating from this reclaimed authority, because the transformation follows a specific pattern that's been recognized by mystics and alchemists for centuries. This isn't a linear progression where you check boxes and move mechanically from one stage to the next. It's more like a spiral, where you revisit certain phases at deeper levels as your awareness expands. But understanding the general architecture of transformation helps you recognize where you are in the process and what's actually happening beneath the surface of your experience. The journey begins with purification, which isn't about making yourself morally pure or spiritually clean in some religious sense. It's about clearing your energetic field of accumulated debris, the emotional baggage, the limiting beliefs, the inherited programming we've been discussing. This phase often feels uncomfortable because you're bringing conscious awareness to things you've been avoiding or denying for years. But this discomfort is productive, necessary, the first step toward genuine transformation. As you continue, you enter what feels like dissolution, where the rigid structures of belief that have been organizing your reality begin to break down. Ideas you held as absolute truths start to feel questionable. Identities you've clung to start feeling like costumes you can choose to wear or remove. This can be disorienting, even frightening, because the old frameworks that gave you certainty are melting away. But this dissolution creates space for something new to emerge, something more authentic and aligned with your actual truth rather than with what you were taught to believe. From that dissolved state, you develop the capacity for separation, learning to discern which thoughts and beliefs actually serve your highest good and which are just noise inherited from others. You become selective, intentional, no longer accepting every thought that crosses your mind as worthy of your attention and energy. This discernment leads naturally to conjunction, that beautiful marriage between your rational mind and your intuitive heart, between your masculine drive and your feminine receptivity. When these complementary forces within you stop fighting and start collaborating, your creative power multiplies exponentially. The unity that emerges from conjunction then goes through fermentation, where it's strengthened and refined through consistent practice and lived experience. You're not just understanding these principles intellectually anymore. You're embodying them, living them, proving them to yourself through direct experience. This embodiment then undergoes distillation, where everything gets refined down to its absolute essence, stripped of any remaining impurities or contradictions. What remains is a signal so clean, so pure, so perfectly aligned that it cuts through all interference. And finally, there's coagulation, where everything that's been happening in the invisible realm of consciousness and energy suddenly solidifies into physical form. Your desires manifest, your intentions materialize. The internal transformation you've been undergoing becomes visible in your external circumstances. This isn't the end of the journey, it's actually a new beginning, because each manifestation teaches you more about how the process works and prepares you for creating at even higher levels. But running through all of these stages, powering the entire transformational journey, there's one frequency that accelerates everything and makes the impossible suddenly accessible. Of all the emotional states you can cultivate, all the vibrational frequencies you can broadcast, there's one that functions as a master key capable of opening every portal, unlocking every door, activating every possibility. That frequency is authentic joy, not the performative happiness you paste on your face when someone asks how you're doing, not the forced positivity you manufacture because you read that you're supposed to think positive thoughts. I'm talking about that deep, genuine joy that arises naturally when you're fully aligned with your truth, when you've stopped resisting reality as it is and started dancing with life exactly as it presents itself in each moment. This kind of joy doesn't require perfect circumstances. It emerges when you're present enough to notice the miracle of existence itself, grateful enough to appreciate the gift of consciousness, experiencing reality through your unique perspective. When you can access this frequency even briefly, you're literally vibrating at the same rate as creative source energy. From that state, manifestation stops being work and becomes play. If you're feeling this joy awakening in you right now, write in the comments, "Joy is my power." We've covered a lot of ground together, and if you're still here with me in this moment, that tells me something important. You're not just casually consuming content, you're genuinely committed to understanding how reality actually works, to reclaiming the creative power that's always been yours. That kind of commitment is rare, and it's exactly what separates people who experience real transformation from those who just think about it. If this conversation has resonated with you, if something shifted inside while you were listening, I'd love for you to join this community by subscribing to the channel. This isn't just random content I'm putting out into the void. Every video is designed to help you break through another layer, to clear another veil, to activate another aspect of your natural manifestation abilities. The people who stay connected here consistently report experiencing synchronicities and breakthroughs that genuinely surprise them. And I believe that's because we're creating a collective field of elevated consciousness that amplifies what's possible for everyone involved. And let me know you made it all the way through by writing in the comments, "This message was meant for me." I read these comments, and there's something powerful about declaring your presence, about announcing to yourself and the universe that you're ready to operate at this level. It's not a small thing. If you found value in what we explored together, hit that like button. It helps this reach others who are searching for exactly what you just discovered, people who are ready for this understanding even if they don't know it yet. There's a video right here that goes even deeper into these principles, showing you exactly how to apply what you've learned in practical ways that create measurable results in your life. Click on it and continue with me over there, because the journey doesn't end here. It's just beginning. I'll see you in the next one.